She let 20 freezing cubs into her cabin. By morning, the alpha made her the chosen one. The storm hit Laura's cabin without warning. She had been working late in her small research station on the frozen moon of Arcturus V, checking the climate sensors and noting the ice readings in her log. The wind howled like a living creature, shaking the thin walls and rattling the small windows. Snow and frost covered everything outside, and the low light of the distant star made it impossible to see very far. The kind of storm that made even the most seasoned explorers think twice before leaving shelter. Laura wrapped her thick fur-lined jacket tighter around her shoulders and glanced at the blinking emergency light on the cabin wall. It meant the power was flickering because of the storm. She had been alone for days, and she liked it that way most of the time. It gave her space to work, to think, to be herself. The universe was wide, cold, and quiet, and she found peace in the emptiness. But tonight, the emptiness felt heavier than usual. A sharp sound from outside caught her attention. Something was moving through the snow, something heavy, dragging itself through the wind. Laura froze. She was used to strange noises, ice cracking, the hum of the machinery, the occasional wild animal. But this was different. This was deliberate, and it was close. She moved quietly to the window, brushing the frost aside. At first, she could not see anything. The snow fell so thick that the world outside had become a white blur. But then she saw them, small shapes, moving together in a cluster, struggling against the storm. 20 of them. Small, fragile creatures with fur and wide eyes, slipping in the snow, shivering, almost collapsing under the cold. Her heart tightened instantly. "They are alive," she whispered to herself, moving to open the door. "I can't leave them out there." Her mind raced. These were not animals she recognized. They were strange, wolf-like but smaller, and she had never seen anything like them in her research records. Still, there was no time to analyze. They were freezing, and if she did not act quickly, some of them would not survive the night. Laura grabbed a set of thermal blankets, her jacket, and a portable heater. She opened the heavy cabin door and stepped into the storm. The wind hit her face and nearly knocked her back, but she forced herself forward, one careful step at a time. The small creatures were huddled together, shivering so hard that their teeth chattered. She dropped the blankets over them gently. They did not growl or bite. They simply froze, staring at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Come inside," she said softly, kneeling in the snow. Her voice was calm and steady, like a human trying to speak to a scared animal. "You're safe now." It took patience and gentle coaxing. One by one, she carried the cubs inside. Some were so weak she had to lift them with both arms, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against her. Inside the cabin, she placed them on the floor near the heater and wrapped them in blankets. The warm air from the device began to ease their shivering, and slowly, a few of them curled up together and closed their eyes. Laura sat on the floor, exhausted, but watching them carefully. She could not stop thinking about what she had done. She had no idea whose children these were or what might happen if the parents found out. The alien species that these cubs belonged to were known across human colonies as dangerous. They were large, powerful, and intelligent predators. Most humans feared them and kept their distance. Yet here she was, alone, with 20 of their young in the middle of a storm, offering them warmth and safety. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft whine from the corner of the cabin. She turned and saw a small cub slowly opening its eyes. It looked up at her and tilted its head. There was something in its gaze that made her pause. Not fear, not aggression, but trust. Somehow it seemed to recognize that she had saved it. She reached out slowly, and it sniffed her hand, then pressed its small body against her palm. "You're okay now," Laura whispered, smiling despite the cold sweat on her face. The cubs began to settle down, and Laura used the time to check the cabin systems. The storm was strong, but she had enough power to keep the heater running for the night. She prepared a small amount of synthetic nutrient paste, enough to give the cubs energy until morning. She fed them one by one, carefully watching their reactions. Some licked the food eagerly, others hesitated, unsure of this strange human who had become their savior. Outside, the wind screamed like a living thing, and Laura could hear the ice cracking under the pressure of the storm. She knew she could not leave the cubs alone for even a moment. The temperature outside was deadly, and if the storm lasted all night, it could kill anything left exposed. She wrapped herself in a blanket and sat near the heater, close enough to watch over them all, her mind alert to every movement. As the hours passed, she began to notice patterns in their behavior. The cubs huddled in groups, communicating silently with soft growls and whimpers. They were intelligent, more than ordinary animals. Some tried to explore the cabin, sniffing at walls and equipment, but they quickly returned to the warmth when they realized it was safe. Laura's fear gradually eased, replaced by curiosity. She wanted to understand them, to learn who they were and why they had ended up here in the storm. At one point, she heard a sound outside, louder than the storm itself. It was a deep, echoing howl, followed by another and then another. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew this sound. It was the call of the pack, the adult wolves, and she knew that these were not ordinary wolves. The howl was different, almost intelligent. She froze, realizing the danger. "They'll come for them," she whispered. "They'll know they're missing." Panic rose in her chest. She thought of the stories she had heard about humans encountering the adult predators. Many had not survived. And yet, looking at the tiny creatures warming themselves in her cabin, she felt a determination she could not explain. She would not abandon them. She would protect them, even if it meant facing the full wrath of the pack. Hours passed slowly. The cubs slept more, and the storm outside began to weaken slightly. The wind's howl became lower, less frantic. Laura allowed herself to relax a little, but she stayed vigilant. She had no weapon in the cabin. Only her courage, her warmth, and her presence could protect them. She realized that she had stepped into something much larger than herself, something that might change her life forever. One cub, the smallest of the 20, crawled onto her lap. It curled up and nuzzled her chest, making a small purring sound. She felt an unexpected warmth spread through her. It was not just from the heater or the blankets. It was something deeper, a connection that she could not explain. She stroked its fur gently, marveling at how soft it was, how alive and trusting the creature seemed. "They're counting on me," Laura thought. "I have to keep them safe." Night continued to stretch on, and she watched over the cubs in shifts of sitting, feeding, and checking the cabin systems. Every sound outside made her heart race. The crack of ice, the distant howl, the shifting wind. She imagined the adult wolves moving through the snow, searching for their young, and she hoped they would not attack. Yet she also knew that the moment they arrived, she would have to face them somehow. Somewhere in the quiet of the storm, Laura began to imagine the possibility that these creatures might not be enemies. That perhaps saving them could be the beginning of something larger, something that humans and the alien pack could share. She had seen their intelligence, their awareness, even in these helpless cubs. And she believed that courage and kindness could matter in ways she did not yet understand. By the time the first faint light of the distant star touched the horizon, the storm had calmed. The cubs slept peacefully, and Laura finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She leaned back against the cabin wall, exhausted but relieved. She knew the real challenge had not yet come. The adult pack would find them soon, and she would have to face them. But she also knew that she had done the right thing. She had acted with compassion, without fear, and in that simple act she felt a strength growing inside her. For the first time in many lonely days, Laura felt a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. She had taken responsibility for these lives, and somehow she knew it would change everything. Outside, the world was still cold, still dangerous, but inside the small cabin, life had found a fragile warmth, a fragile trust. And Laura knew, deep in her heart, that the dawn would bring more than sunlight. It would bring a reckoning, a meeting that could alter the fate of humans and alien pack alike. And so she sat, surrounded by the soft breathing of 20 small cubs, feeling both fear and hope, and waiting for the world outside to catch up with the choice she had already made. The first light of dawn did not bring peace. Laura could feel it in the air, the tension that made her muscles tight and her heart beat faster. The storm had stopped, but the quiet was heavy, filled with the expectation of movement outside. She stayed near the cubs, brushing the frost from their fur and checking that the heater was still running. The little ones stirred, yawning and stretching, but none of them made a sound that could betray her presence to the world outside. Then she heard it. A low, rumbling growl, faint at first but growing louder. It came from beyond the cabin, beyond the snow-covered rocks. Laura froze. She knew that sound. It was not the storm and it was not the wind. It was the pack and it was coming for the cubs. Her mind raced. She had expected danger, but the reality was sharper than she imagined. 20 alien cubs, all depending on her, and a pack of adult predators, much larger and stronger than she could handle, moving closer with every step. She could hear the soft crunch of snow beneath massive paws. She could hear their deep, intelligent breathing. They were not mindless animals. They were hunters and they were precise. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, kneeling by the cubs. "They need me to be calm." Some of the cubs whined, sensing her tension. She stroked them gently. "It's okay, I'm here." Her voice was quiet but steady. She tried to keep her own fear from rising, though it pressed against her chest like a weight. Every story she had ever read about encounters with this species ended with humans injured or worse. But she had no choice now. She had to protect them. Outside, the crunch of the snow grew closer. Laura could make out shapes moving through the mist of frost. Massive bodies with fur darker than the night, eyes sharp and glowing with intelligence. They stopped at the edge of the cabin clearing, and a figure stepped forward. This one was larger than the rest, and something in the way it carried itself told Laura it was the leader. The Alpha. The cubs stirred in response, soft whines rising from the blankets. Laura held her hand over the nearest cub, hoping to comfort it. She could feel her pulse in her throat. She did not know how the Alpha would react. This could be the end of her life and theirs in an instant. The Alpha lowered its head slightly and stared at her. Its eyes were piercing, intelligent, and filled with a strange curiosity. It did not growl, it did not lunge. It simply studied her. Laura returned the gaze, her hands still resting on the cubs. She did not move backward. She did not raise a weapon. She did not make a sound except to whisper softly to the cubs. Hours seemed to pass in seconds. The pack moved closer, circling the cabin, watching her, watching the cubs. Each adult had the power to destroy her, but none of them made a move. The Alpha stepped forward again and let out a deep, resonant howl. It was not a threat, and Laura realized it was a call. The cubs stirred in response, ears twitching, eyes wide. The sound echoed across the frozen moon, sharp and clear. Her mind tried to understand. Was it anger, relief, something else? The other adults moved with subtle gestures, communicating silently. Laura could not understand them, but she felt their awareness, their intelligence, and their focus. They were not mindless beasts. They were organized, deliberate, and aware of her presence. Laura took a deep breath. She had to act carefully. She could not flee, and she could not fight. Her only choice was to show calm, to show that she meant no harm to the cubs, to show respect to the Alpha. Slowly, she stood, keeping her movements deliberate and gentle. She kept her hands visible and made no sudden motions. The cubs stirred but did not cry out. Some tried to follow her movement, but she held them gently, letting them stay close. She stepped outside the cabin, feeling the cold bite at her skin, the wind still sharp but weaker now. The snow under her boots was soft, but the presence of the pack made every step a careful negotiation. The Alpha watched her, its head tilting slightly, ears flicking with attention. It let out another low growl, but this time it seemed almost like a question. Laura did not flinch. She held her hands near her chest, as if to say she meant no harm, only protection. She could feel the pack watching every movement, evaluating her. One of the cubs broke free from her grasp and ran a few steps toward the pack, then stopped. Its small body trembled, but it did not run back. The alpha's gaze shifted to the cub, then back to Laura. Laura spoke softly. "It's okay, they trust me. I trust you too." The pack moved slowly, almost cautiously, forming a loose circle around her. The alpha came closer, its size impressive, its fur thick and dark. It stopped a few meters away and studied her. Laura felt the weight of its intelligence pressing against her mind, not in words but in presence. She realized that it could sense her thoughts, her fear, her courage. She held her ground, hoping the cubs understood not to panic. A few of them whimpered softly, and she leaned down to gather them close. "Stay close," she whispered. Her voice was steady, her movements deliberate. She had no idea what would happen next, but she refused to let fear rule her. The alpha tilted its head again and let out a longer howl. The sound was answered by the other adults, their voices weaving together like a song of the wild. It was not a sound of attack. It was a sound of searching, of communication. Laura realized that this was how they shared information, how they coordinated their actions. One of the adults stepped forward, smaller than the alpha but still massive compared to her. It sniffed the air, sniffed the cubs, then backed away. Laura held her breath. The pack was judging her. They were deciding if she was friend or threat. She could feel the tension in the air, sharp and electric, like the static before a lightning strike. The cubs stirred again, and Laura whispered soothing words. "It's okay. They won't hurt you." She could feel the warmth of their tiny bodies, their trust giving her courage. She knew she had to show the adults that she had only acted to protect them, not to harm them. She moved slowly to the edge of the clearing, showing the cubs were safe and unharmed. The alpha took a step closer, lowering its massive head to sniff the ground near her. Its eyes never left her. Laura did not flinch. She met its gaze, steady, calm, refusing to show fear. The cubs remained quiet, sensing her confidence. She realized that the animals were not only evaluating her, they were testing her, looking for signs of weakness or malice. The other adults watched, their bodies tense, their eyes sharp. Laura could feel the power around her. She was alone, yet surrounded by the most dangerous creatures she had ever seen. And yet, something remarkable happened. The alpha took a step back, then another, and then settled into a position that was not aggressive. Its eyes remained on her, intelligent and alert, but it did not move to attack. Laura let out a slow breath she had been holding without realizing it. The tension eased slightly. She had survived the first encounter. She had shown courage and respect, and the pack had responded with something almost like curiosity rather than rage. Hours passed as she stayed with the cubs, the pack watching from the edges of the clearing. They communicated silently, moving and shifting in ways she could not understand. She watched the cubs respond, following the pack's subtle signals, learning without words. It was clear that these creatures were intelligent beyond anything she had expected. Laura realized that the storm had brought more than danger. It had brought opportunity. By saving the cubs, she had stepped into a world she did not fully understand, a world where humans and this alien species could interact in ways that could change the future. She felt a strange connection to the alpha, a sense that it was studying her as much as she was studying it. As the day moved forward, the pack remained in the clearing, their presence steady but not threatening. The cubs began to explore cautiously, returning to Laura for warmth and reassurance. She could see that the adults were teaching the young ones through observation, guiding them without force. It was a methodical, intelligent system of learning and communication. Laura felt a new determination grow within her. She would protect these cubs. She would respect the pack. She would learn from them. And in that, She realized that she had begun a journey that would take her far beyond the frozen moon, far beyond the safety of her cabin, and into the heart of a world that humans had only glimpsed from a distance. By the end of the day, she was exhausted, but the cubs were safe and the adults had not attacked. She had survived the first encounter, shown courage, and begun to earn the respect of creatures far larger and stronger than herself. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the Alpha's eyes had told her something important. This was only the beginning. The sun rose slowly over the frozen landscape, sending pale light across the snow-covered rocks and the small clearing where Laura's cabin sat. The wind had died down completely now, leaving an almost unnatural silence. Laura moved carefully among the cubs, making sure they were warm, fed, and safe. They had begun to explore the cabin more confidently, creeping along the walls and sniffing at every object. Some of them tumbled over one another, chasing shadows cast by the morning light. Outside, the pack remained near the edge of the clearing, watching. They did not hide, but neither did they approach too closely. Laura could feel their eyes on her every move. She knew they were intelligent, aware, and assessing her. She did not flinch. She had spent the night learning that calm courage mattered more than weapons. The cubs trusted her, and for the first time, she realized that she could trust the pack not to attack without reason. The Alpha stepped forward, larger than any other member of the group, its fur shimmering slightly in the pale sunlight. Laura felt the weight of its gaze, powerful and commanding. The cubs had gathered near her, sensing that something important was happening. She knelt down, letting them crawl closer, and kept her hands open to show she meant no harm. The Alpha circled slowly, sniffing the air, the cubs, and then Laura herself. Its movements were deliberate, controlled, intelligent. It was testing her, trying to understand the human who had dared to save its young. Laura met its gaze steadily, her heart pounding, but she did not look away. Fear would only make the situation worse. She had learned that much the night before. The other adults moved slightly, forming a semicircle around the clearing. They were massive, but their movements were smooth and precise. Every step seemed calculated, every glance meaningful. Laura could sense their curiosity and their caution. They had never seen a human act in this way, protecting alien young instead of fleeing or harming them. One of the cubs whimpered softly and ran toward the Alpha, its tiny paws slipping in the snow. The Alpha paused, watching it closely, then lowered its massive head until their eyes met. It made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, not a command, but something that Laura could feel in her chest, a vibration that seemed to carry meaning. The cub pressed closer to the Alpha, and the sound from the Alpha became gentler, almost approving. Laura swallowed hard. This was the first sign she had that the Alpha might not see her as a threat. She moved a small step forward, careful not to startle the pack. "I only wanted to keep them safe," she said softly, her voice carrying across the snow. "I didn't mean to take them. I only wanted to help." The Alpha paused, and the other adults turned their heads toward her. They communicated silently, through small gestures and subtle movements. Laura could not understand their language, but she could see the meaning in their actions. They were evaluating her. She had earned a chance to show her intentions, but they were still wary. The cubs gathered near her feet, some daring to step a little closer to the adults. One cub, the boldest of all, stepped directly toward the Alpha. Laura held her breath, fearing the worst, but the Alpha simply sniffed the cub and let out a soft rumble. It turned its gaze back to Laura, and she felt a strange connection. It was as if the Alpha could see into her thoughts, sensing her fear, her hope, and her courage. She took another step forward, keeping her hands open, showing no aggression. The cubs followed her lead, staying close but not hiding. Laura felt a sudden warmth in her chest. She realized that the pack was testing her not with aggression, but with patience and observation. They wanted to understand if she could be trusted. The Alpha lowered its massive head again, this time closer to her level. Its eyes were deep and intelligent, studying her face, her posture, her hands. Laura did not move. She held her breath and waited, knowing that any sudden motion could change everything. The cubs, sensing the tension, pressed closer to her. She stroked their fur gently, keeping them calm. Hours seemed to pass in silence, broken only by the soft sounds of the cubs and the occasional low rumble from the alpha. Laura realized that she was not only being judged, but also being observed in a way that few humans had ever experienced. These creatures were capable of understanding, of reasoning, of forming judgments based on actions rather than fear or instinct. One of the other adults stepped forward, smaller but still imposing, and sniffed near Laura's feet. It was testing her space, her willingness to remain calm. Laura remained still, keeping her gaze on the alpha, who watched the interaction silently. She realized that this was a ritual of trust. She could not rush it, she could not force it. She could only show that she was steady, that she meant no harm, that she had only acted to protect the cubs. The sun climbed higher, and the light made the snow sparkle like millions of tiny stars. The pack shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the passage of time, the persistence of the human, and the safety of the cubs. Laura felt her muscles relax just a little, but she did not let her guard down completely. She knew that the test was not over. The alpha was still deciding her fate. Then something unexpected happened. The alpha let out a long, low howl, different from the one she had heard before. It was not a call of anger, nor a call of aggression. It was a sound of recognition, of acknowledgement. The other adults responded with their own softer sounds, and the cubs whined in excitement. Laura could feel the vibration of the sounds through her chest. It was powerful, almost overwhelming, but it carried a sense of peace. She realized that the alpha was accepting her presence, accepting her protection of the cubs. It was a moment of connection that went beyond language or species. She had not only survived the test but had also earned a place of trust. Her heart raced with relief and awe. She had done the impossible. The cubs began to explore more boldly now, encouraged by the calmness of the adults. They sniffed, tumbled, and chased each other in the snow, while the adults watched, their movements relaxed but still alert. Laura smiled softly, seeing that the cubs were safe and that the pack was not a threat, at least for now. She spoke softly to the alpha, almost in a whisper. "I only wanted to help them. I didn't take them from you. I only wanted them to live." The alpha did not respond with sound, but Laura could feel its awareness, its understanding. It was not human, but it could recognize the meaning behind her words. Time passed slowly, and the tension in the clearing began to ease. Laura could see the intelligence in every movement of the adults. They were not just predators, they were guardians, teachers, and leaders. Their presence was immense, yet they did not overstep. They allowed her to remain with the cubs, observing her actions carefully. As the day wore on, Laura began to understand something remarkable. She was witnessing a society, a structure of intelligence that humans rarely encountered. The pack communicated without words, taught their young through observation, and made judgments based on actions. It was a lesson in patience, courage, and understanding. The alpha approached Laura again, its eyes meeting hers. She knelt down, letting the cubs move freely around her, showing that she trusted the adults as much as they were beginning to trust her. The alpha lowered its head until it was close to her level, almost as if it were speaking without words. Laura felt a deep connection, a sense that the creature could see into her heart and recognize her intentions. Then, slowly, the alpha backed away and sat on its haunches. It did not leave, but it showed a sign of acceptance. The other adults mirrored the movement, sitting or lying near the clearing, relaxed but watchful. Laura let out a long breath she had been holding without realizing it. She had survived the meeting. She had not only protected the cubs, but had also earned the respect of the most powerful creatures she had ever faced. The cubs began to return to the adults, following subtle gestures and sounds. Laura watched as they reconnected, knowing that her role was complete for now. She had proven herself through calm courage, through patience, and through kindness. The Alpha had acknowledged her, and she had formed a bridge of trust between species. As the sun climbed higher, Laura felt a strange sense of awe and possibility. She realized that this was not the end of the encounter, but the beginning of something larger. She had been tested, judged, and accepted, and in that acceptance lay the potential for a new relationship between humans and this alien pack. She knelt in the snow and watched as the cubs moved among the adults, learning, exploring, and growing. She felt a warmth in her chest, not from the sun, not from the cabin, but from the connection she had forged. The Alpha watched her still, and she knew that the next step would be more than survival. It would be recognition, understanding, and perhaps even a new role in their world. By the time evening approached, Laura was tired but exhilarated. She had faced creatures far stronger and more intelligent than herself, and had not only survived but gained trust. The cubs slept around her, warm and safe, and the adults had retreated slightly, giving her space while maintaining vigilance. She knew that the Alpha's eyes had followed her every action, and she could sense a growing respect. This day had changed everything. The storm had brought the cubs into her cabin, and in protecting them, she had faced the pack, learned their ways, and survived. She had begun a journey that would take her far beyond the frozen moon, far beyond what she had imagined. And as she watched the Alpha settle near the clearing, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known. She was no longer just a human on a distant moon. She was someone who had earned the trust of a powerful and intelligent species. The morning after the meeting with the pack, Laura woke to the soft sounds of the cubs stirring. The cabin was quiet except for their little noises and the faint hum of the heater. She stretched and looked around at the small creatures curled up in blankets. Their trust in her was growing, but she knew the real test was still ahead. The Alpha had not left, and its presence outside the cabin was like a shadow over every thought she had. She stepped carefully outside, the snow cold beneath her boots, and saw the Alpha sitting a short distance away. Its eyes followed her, alert and intelligent. The other adults were positioned around the clearing, their posture relaxed but ready. Laura felt the weight of their awareness pressing down on her. This was no ordinary animal behavior. This was a test, a challenge of courage, patience, and understanding. The cubs began to follow her cautiously, sensing the importance of the moment. They stayed close to her feet, looking up at her for guidance. Laura bent down to stroke one of them. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We are ready." The Alpha let out a long, low growl that vibrated through the air. It was not threatening but commanding, a sound that seemed to speak without words. The other adults responded with soft murmurs and movements. Laura felt a shiver run through her. She was about to face the true judgment of the pack. The first test was patience. The Alpha motioned with a subtle gesture, and a small gust of wind carried a scent toward her. It was strong and strange, and Laura realized it was designed to unsettle her, to see if fear would control her actions. She stood still, breathing slowly, focusing on the cubs and their safety. Her hands were open, her posture calm. The wind pressed against her face, chilling her skin, but she did not move. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The Alpha watched her carefully. The cubs nestled closer to her, sensing that their guardian needed to remain steady. She whispered softly to them, calming them as much as herself. "It's okay," she said. "We are strong together." The second test came quickly. One of the cubs wandered too far, slipping on the ice toward the pack. Laura froze as the Alpha's gaze sharpened. The adult creatures moved closer, their eyes fixed on the small cub. Laura's heart raced. She could not reach the cub in time to prevent danger if the adults attacked. She held her breath and waited, showing no panic. To her relief, the Alpha stopped the approach with a subtle movement, a gesture of control. The cub turned and returned to Laura. The Alpha observed her reaction. She had not screamed, not lunged, not tried to manipulate the situation. She had waited, stayed calm, and protected the cubs through her patience and presence. Hours passed, and the pack continued to test her in small ways. They moved through the snow, circling her, observing her, presenting challenges without aggression. A gust of wind knocked over some equipment, a cub tripped and cried out, and a branch fell nearby. In each situation, Laura stayed composed. She tended to the cubs, adjusting blankets, offering comfort, and showing that she could remain calm under pressure. The third test was more subtle. The alpha approached, its eyes piercing, studying her every movement. It exhaled slowly, a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. Laura knelt down, letting the cubs move freely around her, showing that she had no fear, no weapon, and no intention to harm. The alpha's gaze seemed to search her mind, sensing her courage, her empathy, her determination to protect the young. The cubs reacted to the alpha's presence. They pressed closer to Laura, their tiny bodies trembling slightly. She held them gently, reassuring them with her voice and touch. "We are safe," she whispered. "They see we mean no harm." Her words were simple, but they carried her intent clearly. The alpha observed, silent but aware, testing her through the reactions of the cubs as much as through her own actions. By midday, the tests grew more difficult. The alpha and the other adults moved in closer, presenting subtle threats without aggression. One adult let out a low growl as it passed near a cub, testing Laura's reaction. She did not panic. She stepped forward calmly, placing herself between the cub and the adult, showing protective intent without violence. Her actions were deliberate, measured, and calm. The cubs recognized her authority and stayed close. The alpha circled her slowly, sniffing the air, the cubs, and Laura herself. Every gesture had meaning. She understood that the pack was communicating silently, testing her understanding of their ways and judging whether she could be trusted. She moved carefully, showing respect, patience, and courage. Every moment was tense, but she refused to falter. In the afternoon, the final part of the test began. The alpha approached one of the cubs, the smallest and weakest. It sniffed the cub, then looked directly at Laura. The silence was complete except for the soft sound of breathing and the faint hum of the cabin heater from inside. Laura knelt, holding the cub gently. Her hands were open, her body relaxed. She met the alpha's gaze steadily, showing no fear, no aggression, and complete commitment to protecting the young. The alpha moved closer, sniffing near her hands, then the cub, then her again. Laura could feel its intelligence, its awareness pressing on her mind. She spoke softly. "They are safe because I care," she said. "I only want them to live." The alpha did not respond with sound, but the vibration of its body and the subtle movements of the other adults made it clear they were listening, judging, and understanding. Hours passed as the pack observed her. The cubs grew bolder, moving freely around her, showing their trust. Laura tended to them, feeding them, adjusting blankets and speaking softly. She felt a strange sense of connection to the alpha. It was testing her not with violence but with patience, observation, and judgment. She realized that courage was more than physical strength. It was steadiness of mind, clarity of intent, and care for those weaker than oneself. By evening, the alpha stepped back and let out a long, low howl. The other adults responded with softer sounds. The cubs reacted, whining and moving closer to Laura. She realized that the alpha had completed its evaluation. She had passed the tests of patience, courage, and protection. She had shown that her intentions were pure, that she was capable of care and strength without fear or aggression. The pack's demeanor changed subtly. They no longer circled her, nor did they maintain tense postures. They moved with a calm, measured awareness. The alpha's gaze remained on Laura, and she felt a deep, almost unspoken recognition. She had been judged and accepted. The cub's trust had guided her, and through that, the adults had seen her character. Laura sat in the snow, exhausted but calm. The cubs curled near her, nuzzling her hands and legs. She looked at the alpha, seeing intelligence, awareness, and a strange warmth in its eyes. The day had been long, the tests challenging, but she had emerged not only safe but respected. She realized that the alpha had chosen to acknowledge her courage, her compassion, and her role in protecting the young. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow, Laura felt a sense of accomplishment and awe. She had faced creatures far stronger than herself, passed tests that relied on character rather than force, and earned the trust of beings that humans had feared for centuries. The cubs slept peacefully, and the adults had settled nearby, maintaining vigilance but showing no aggression. Laura understood that this moment marked a turning point. She was no longer just a human alone on a frozen moon. She had become part of a larger story, a participant in a connection between species that few humans would ever experience. She had learned that courage, empathy, and patience mattered as much as weapons and strength. The night came and Laura watched as the alpha moved closer to the cubs, allowing them to rest safely. She stayed nearby, keeping her presence calm and steady. She had proven herself and the pack had recognized her role. She was exhausted, but her heart was full. She had passed the test, and she knew that her life and the lives of the cubs would never be the same again. For the first time, she allowed herself a smile. The alpha's gaze met hers one last time before it settled near the cubs. It was a recognition without words, a promise that her courage and care had been acknowledged. She had faced the pack, earned their trust, and become someone important in their eyes. And she knew that the next step, whatever it might be, would bring even greater challenges and even greater purpose. The test was complete. The chosen path had begun. The night had passed quietly. The cubs slept close to Laura, warm and safe, and the adults remained nearby, alert but calm. The cold moonlight reflected off the snow, casting long shadows across the clearing. Laura sat on a small rock outside her cabin, brushing the fur of the cubs who had wandered near her. Her mind was heavy with thoughts, but she felt a new strength, a strange calm that came from passing the alpha's test. Then, without warning, the alpha stepped forward. It moved slowly, each step deliberate, and stopped just a few meters from Laura. The other adults shifted, forming a loose circle around them, their eyes watching intently. The cubs pressed closer to Laura, sensing the importance of the moment. The alpha's gaze was steady, intelligent, and commanding. Laura took a deep breath. She knew this was the moment that would define everything, the moment the pack would decide her place in their world. She knelt slowly, keeping her hands open, showing she meant no harm. Her heart pounded, but her voice was calm as she whispered softly to the cubs, "Stay close. Everything will be okay." The alpha exhaled a long, low rumble, a sound that resonated in the air like a living vibration. Laura felt it in her chest and stomach, a deep acknowledgement. The cubs stirred slightly but remained near her. She realized that the alpha was communicating, testing her understanding of its meaning. She did not move, did not speak, only waited patiently, showing trust in its judgment. The other adults made small movements, subtle shifts in posture and position. Laura could sense their awareness, their intelligence, and the deliberation behind every motion. This was not aggression. This was recognition. They were observing her, learning her character as much as she had learned theirs. The alpha lowered its massive head closer to Laura. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the moonlight, locked with hers. She could feel the weight of its judgment, not harsh but powerful. Every nerve in her body was alert, yet she remained still. She understood in that moment that the alpha was offering a choice, to step forward with courage and acceptance or to retreat in fear. She chose courage. Slowly, Laura placed her hands on the snow, leaning slightly forward, showing humility and respect. The alpha's gaze softened. It let out a low, resonant sound, more of a vibration than a growl, and Laura felt it as an acknowledgement of her intent. She had passed the tests, proven her courage, patience, and care for the cubs. Now the final recognition awaited. The alpha made a sound she could feel more than hear, and one by one, the other adults responded with their own soft, low sounds. The cubs reacted immediately, nuzzling closer to Laura, recognizing that their guardian was being honored. Laura smiled softly, realizing that the moment was not only about her, but about the bond she had formed with the young and the pack. Time seemed to stretch. The snow-covered landscape was still and quiet, except for the soft vibrations of the pack communicating. Laura's mind raced with anticipation. She could sense the intelligence around her, the awareness that she was being chosen, but she had no idea what it would truly mean. She kept her hands open and her posture calm, trusting in the process. Then the alpha stepped closer, its massive head nearly touching her hands. It lowered itself until it was at her level, close but not threatening. Laura felt a connection, a deep awareness passing between them. It was as if the alpha could sense everything she had done, every choice, every moment of courage, every act of care for the cubs. She had earned their trust. The alpha tilted its head and made a long, deep sound, a resonance that vibrated through the clearing. The other adults responded with their own sounds, and the cubs reacted immediately, pressing close to Laura and whimpering softly in excitement. She understood now. The alpha had made her the chosen one, a human who had proven herself worthy of trust and respect. Her heart swelled with a mix of awe and humility. She knelt fully in the snow, touching the cubs and allowing the alpha to approach as close as it wished. It sniffed near her hands and shoulders, a gesture of recognition. The other adults settled around her, calm but alert, acknowledging her role in the pack's world. Laura spoke softly, more to herself than to the alpha. "I never wanted to be special," she said. "I only wanted to save them." She paused, stroking a cub who had crawled onto her lap. "But maybe this is the way we can help each other." The alpha tilted its head again and let out a low, approving rumble. The sound carried a sense of understanding, acceptance, and recognition. The cubs whined softly, their trust in her now fully confirmed. She had become the bridge between humans and the alien pack, the chosen guardian who could protect, care, and communicate with both worlds. As the day progressed, Laura walked among the pack with the cubs. She fed them, watched them explore, and observed the adults teaching the young ones. Every movement of the pack was deliberate and full of meaning. Laura began to understand their society, their intelligence, and their ways of communication. She realized that she could learn from them as much as they had learned from her. Captain Daniel Brooks and his human team, who had been observing from a distance, approached cautiously. They had come in fear of the pack, weapons ready, but now they hesitated. They could see the bond forming, the trust established, and the humans lowered their weapons. Laura stepped forward to meet them, calm but confident. "They won't attack," she said softly. "They trust me, and now we have to respect them." Captain Brooks studied her, amazed by her calm and the trust between her and the alpha. He nodded slowly, lowering his weapon fully. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted. You've earned their respect." The alpha watched from a short distance, its eyes on Laura. It exhaled slowly, a vibration that seemed like approval. The cubs played nearby, showing no fear of humans or adults. Laura realized that the relationship she had formed with the pack could create a new alliance, a connection between humans and this alien species that had always been feared. As evening fell, the alpha approached her again. Its massive body moved with calm grace, and it stopped just a few meters away. Laura knelt, letting the cubs settle around her. The alpha lowered its head close to the ground and made a deep, resonant sound. Laura understood without words. She was officially recognized. She was the chosen one, honored among the pack for her courage, patience, and care. Tears filled her eyes, though she tried to hide them. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, rescuing the cubs, could lead to this moment. She reached out gently, placing her hand near the alpha's massive head. It did not move away. Instead, It leaned slightly into her touch, a gesture of trust and recognition that words could not capture. The other adults shifted, forming a circle around them. They did not leave, but they showed a new calm. Laura could sense the intelligence in their gaze, the approval in their presence. The cubs moved freely now, exploring the snow and returning to her for warmth and comfort. The bond was complete. Captain Brooks and his team observed quietly, learning from Laura's connection with the pack. They understood that this human had achieved something no weapon or technology could accomplish: trust. She had bridged the gap between species, earned the respect of powerful creatures, and created a future that might allow humans and the alien pack to coexist peacefully. Laura rose slowly, brushing snow from her jacket, and looked around the clearing. The alpha watched her, still close but relaxed. The cubs frolicked around her feet. She felt a sense of pride, humility, and awe all at once. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a guardian, a chosen one, a link between worlds. The pack settled for the night, adults and cubs alike, showing calm and trust. Laura stayed with them, keeping her presence gentle and steady. She spoke softly to the cubs, telling them stories of warmth and safety, of courage and trust. The alpha's gaze remained on her, and she felt the understanding that had passed between them. This moment would stay with her forever. She had faced fear, danger, and the unknown. She had chosen courage and compassion over panic and aggression. And in return, she had earned respect, recognition, and a place in the world of the pack. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, lighting the snow with gold. Laura sat among the cubs, watching the alpha and adults move gracefully through the clearing. She realized that this day had changed everything. Humans and the alien pack, once separated by fear and misunderstanding, could now begin to build a bond, guided by trust, courage, and care. And Laura knew that she would continue to protect the cubs, learn from the pack, and serve as the bridge between two worlds. She had been tested, chosen, and honored. She had become the chosen one. As the sun rose fully, Laura whispered to the alpha and the cubs, "We are together now. Nothing will break this bond." The alpha tilted its head, a deep rumble answering her words. The cubs ran and tumbled near her, safe and happy. Laura smiled, knowing that her life and the lives of the pack had been changed forever. She stood slowly, brushing snow from her boots, and looked at the horizon. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing. She had earned the trust of creatures stronger, wiser, and more powerful than she had ever imagined. And that trust would guide her, the cubs, and the pack into a new beginning.